Shut up, you parasite! That was the last thing I heard before my own son raised his hand and slapped me. Not once, not twice, but 20 slaps. 20 slaps. 20 times my heart broke into pieces, mixing with the cold, indifferent laughter of my daughter-in-law right beside me. That night, amidst the pain and humiliation, I had an epiphany. Silence was no longer love, it was suicide. I understood that the time had come to stand up for myself. The next morning, after they left for work, I secretly sold the house, and when he returned, inserting his key into the lock was new. Today, I want to tell you that story, the story of a quiet resistance, of a justice that needs no shouting, and of a new beginning at 60 years old. Before I continue, I would love to know where you are watching this video from. Every one of your comments is a heartbeat that connects hearts that feel the same way. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel, because here, every story is a reminder. It is never too late to say, "This life is mine." My name is Olivia. I am 60 years old, and my whole life I always believed that family was everything, the only place where you could find unconditional love. I cherished that belief like a prized possession, guarding it and protecting it. Even when the cracks began to appear in the wall of happiness I worked so hard to build. Until that fateful day, the day my son, Robert, the son I carried in my womb with pain, whom I raised with all my love, raised his hand and struck me. It was not once or twice, but 20 slaps, each one tearing at my old heart. And the most horrible thing of all was the mocking laugh of my daughter-in-law, Carol, that resonated in the room like a melody deriding my pain. It was a typical Sunday, like so many others, the day the family usually gathered around a cozy table. I had gotten up early, preparing the baked ziti that Robert had loved since he was a kid. That special dish with lots of creamy sauce, which he always requested every time he had another birthday, like an indispensable ritual on his special day. I put my whole heart into every step, from choosing the freshest ingredients to the exact seasoning to make it to his liking. I wanted this meal to be perfect, as a way to express a mother's love. Carol arrived first, punctual as always. The strong scent of her perfume invaded my nose, a smell that always gave me a headache, but I forced myself to suppress it, trying to maintain a conciliatory attitude. She gave me a pale smile that never quite reached her eyes, and then she placed a bottle of cheap wine on the table. "For my dear mother-in-law," she said with a somewhat ironic tone, knowing full well that I do not drink alcohol because I take medication for high blood pressure. I thanked her as always, a formal acknowledgement, just to maintain harmony in the house, to avoid unnecessary trouble. I knew deep down in my heart that Carol did not like me at all. She saw me as a burden, an obstacle in her life and Robert's. But I kept trying, every day, to make the family atmosphere less tense, even if only a little. Robert arrived half an hour later, already grumbling. I knew it immediately by the way he harshly tossed his bunch of keys onto the table. The metallic sound startled me. His abrupt way of greeting me, a simple "Mum," cold, without any warmth. Something must not have gone well at work, I told myself, trying to find an excuse for my son's attitude. I did not ask. I was already too accustomed to Robert's outbursts of anger whenever something upset him. Those rages for no reason, those harsh words he threw at me, as if I were a punching bag where he vented all of his life's frustrations. I knew that if I spoke, things would only get worse. We sat down at the table and I served the food in silence. The delicious smell of the baked ziti spread throughout the room, but I no longer felt any interest in it. I just wanted the meal to end quickly so I could return to my room and escape the heavy atmosphere that enveloped us. It was then that, unintentionally, I mentioned in passing that the kitchen faucet was dripping and needed repair. It was just a casual comment, a small reminder, without any intention of reproach or giving orders. But Robert turned it into an excuse to vent his rage. "The faucet in your house, is that what you mean, mother?" he snarled, emphasizing each word, as if to remind me that I was there by his grace. Every word he uttered was like a stab in my heart. He wanted me to remember that I was just a parasite, a superfluous person in that house. But the truth was not that. That house had been purchased with the money from the sale of the apartment where I had lived for 30 years after my husband passed away. It was the home that my husband and I had built, where we kept so many happy memories of my family. Back then, Robert told me I should put it in his name to make taxes easier. And trusting my son, I signed the transfer papers, but I kept the original deeds in my name. I trusted him, in my son's promise, that he would take care of me, that I would always have a home. "It is just a faucet, my son," I replied softly, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. It was then that he slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump with a jarring noise. "Do you think you are very smart, mother? Do you think you can tell me what to do in my own house?" His voice was full of anger, his face flushed, the blue veins marked on his forehead. Carol laughed softly behind her napkin, her eyes gleaming with that terribly self-satisfied delight she always showed when Robert and I had an argument. She enjoyed seeing me humiliated, seeing me suffer my son's wrath. "Shut up, you parasite!" His voice roared like thunder that struck me directly in the ears, making me jump. "Do you forget that I took you in when nobody else wanted you?" He continued, getting up from his chair, his eyes looking at me with fire. "You forget that you could be in a nursing home right now." I remained silent, my eyes fixed on the full plate of food. The baked ziti I had prepared with so much love now seemed like an insipid mess, as heavy as the air around us. "Look at me when I speak to you, mother," he shouted, grabbing my chin to lift my face. I looked at him, my eyes filled with helplessness and pain. It was then that it happened. The first slap landed like a shock, not because of the pain, but because of the surprise. Never in my whole life had my son hit me. I felt my cheek sting as tears welled up, unable to be held back. Carol gasped dramatically, covering her mouth with her hand, but her eyes were smiling, enjoying this spectacle, enjoying my suffering. "Robert, please," I whispered, my voice trembling in supplication. The second slap was harder, then the third, the fourth. I lost count after the 10th. My ears were ringing, my entire face burned. I did not scream, I did not plead, I did not resist. I remained sitting motionless, letting my own son vent his rage on me. I felt like a rag doll, tossed back and forth in his fury. When he finally stopped, he was panting with sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at him, and I did not recognize the man in front of me. Where was the child who held my hand to cross the street? Where was the teenager who brought me flowers stolen from the neighbor's yard on Mother's Day? The images of a loving, filial Robert in my memories shattered. "This is so you learn to respect who is in charge here," he said, adjusting his shirt as if he had just closed an important business deal, without showing the slightest regret. Carol was now laughing openly, without pretense, as if she had achieved her goal. I rose silently, leaving the plate of food untouched, and walked slowly to the back room of the house. I closed the door. The soft click resonated in my mind like a declaration. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears fall. But they were not tears of pain or fear, but tears of a decision that was crystallizing in my heart, cold as ice on a winter night. A cold, firm decision, with no room for affection or indulgence. As I touched my swollen face, I suddenly remembered the nightstand drawer where I kept the original house deeds, documents that proved that legally the place was still mine. Robert had convinced me to transfer the property into his name, but we had never completed the legal process. He only had a private contract, without real legal value. He had taken advantage of my credulity, of my mother's love. That night, as I listened to their loud laughter and chatter in the living room as if nothing had happened, I took the papers out of the drawer and put them in a briefcase. I knew I had to act. The next morning, when they left for work, I would visit my old friend George, a retired lawyer who still maintained contacts in the legal world. I trusted George. He was the only person I could rely on at that moment. I lay down fully dressed, unable to sleep. Time passed slowly as I planned every step I would take. It would not be a noisy or violent revenge. It would be silent and decisive, like the ice that now replaced the place where there was once maternal love. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would act coldly with determination, so they would know that I was not a weak woman and easy to intimidate. I would show them that I still had value, that I still had power. That night felt as long as a century. Every minute stretched out, weighing on my heart. I lay awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind reeling with thoughts and plans. The physical pain in my face had diminished a bit, but the wound in my soul still ached, burning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of Robert raising his hand again, and I heard Carol's mocking laughter again. They were like daggers, continually cutting my soul. I had lived for my son, for my family, sacrificing my youth and my own dreams, only to receive humiliation and violence in return. A hot tear rolled down my cheek, soaking the old pillow. No, I would not cry any more. Tears would not solve anything. Now I needed lucidity, coldness, to execute my plan. When the first rays of sunlight peered through the crack in the window, I heard Robert's familiar footsteps in the hallway, the jingle of his keys, and then the sound of the shower water. Finally, the slamming of the front door, a resonant sound announcing that he had left for work. Immediately after, Carol, the tapping of her heels echoing through the empty house. As if wanting to boast about her freedom, I remained motionless, holding my breath, waiting, trying to hear if the car was coming back. I waited half an hour longer, enough to ensure they would not return, having forgotten something. I learned this precaution from my years as a mother, always having to anticipate any unforeseen event. I got up silently, my body aching after a sleepless night. I tucked the briefcase with the documents into my purse, the most important document of my life at that moment. I put on my warmest coat, the one Robert called an old rag. But it was my favorite coat, warm and resilient, like myself. I went out the back door, avoiding the main one, so as not to run into any curious neighbors' glances. That day was somber and cold, with grey clouds covering the sky, as if the weather was also in complicity with my mood. A chill enveloped me, matching the coldness that was emerging in my heart. I walked 3 blocks, each step slow and heavy, until I reached George's house in Queens. He was a good friend of my late husband, a brilliant retired lawyer, but who still maintained contacts in the legal world. I trusted him completely. He opened the door still in his pajamas, his grey hair messy, but his expression immediately changed when he saw my swollen face. His eyes revealed concern and surprise. "Olivia, my goodness, what happened to you?" he asked in a stunned voice. "I need your help, George," I said simply, walking in when he let me pass. "I need to sell a house." I did not need to say much more. George was perceptive enough to understand everything. George poured me coffee while he reviewed the documents I had brought him. His eyes moved from the papers to my swollen face, connecting the dots himself without me having to explain the details. He was an intelligent, insightful man, and he had known my late husband. He understood my family situation well. He knew Robert's character. "The papers are still in your name," he confirmed, adjusting his glasses on the bridge of his nose. "Robert never registered the transfer with the notary. Legally, the house is still yours, Olivia." I felt a cold relief run through my body, like an electric shock. A ray of hope appeared in the darkness. "So I can sell it?" I asked, my voice still trembling. "Yes, you can," George replied, setting the coffee cup on the table, his eyes looking at me intently with determination. "But are you sure about this? After all, he is your son." He still hesitated a bit. He wanted me to reconsider, but I would not. I had decided. I gently touched my swollen cheek, feeling the persistent pain. A son who did this in my own home, in front of his wife, who was laughing at me. "I am sure, George." My words were firm, without the slightest hesitation. I had endured enough. He nodded seriously, understanding my determination. "I know a couple looking for a house in that area, in Forest Hills. They can pay in cash and close the transaction quickly if you want." Hearing this, a flash of light sparked in my mind. "That is exactly what I want," I replied. "I want everything done while they are at work. I want Robert to come home today and find strangers living there." George hesitated, a worried look on his face. "Olivia, this is really just," I finished, not letting him complete the sentence. "Just, George. I am not asking for anything more than what legally belongs to me." He did not argue any more. Instead, he picked up his phone and began making calls. First to the interested couple, the Masons, then to a notary friend of his in Manhattan, and then to a moving company. George organized everything quickly and efficiently, as if he had done this job 1,000 times. As I watched him arrange everything, I felt relief for the first time in many years, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my heart. I knew I was on the right path. Time passed quickly, like a torrent carrying away all worries. Before noon, I was already at a notary's office in downtown New York City, signing the last documents to sell the house. My hands did not tremble. My heart did not feel pain, only a strange calm. The buying couple, the Masons, seemed kind and very excited about the sudden purchase. They did not ask about the strange circumstances, perhaps because the discount was too attractive to ask questions, or perhaps they were discreet people who understood that there are stories that should not be questioned. Can you move in today? I told them as I handed them the keys, without a hint of regret in my eyes. The house is furnished, but you can do whatever you want with the furniture. I do not want anything from that place. Mrs. Mason took my hand, her eyes full of understanding. Thank you for selling us the house. We always dreamed of living in that neighborhood. I did not have the courage to tell her that place was no longer a dream for me, but a nightmare. I just smiled and wished them happiness. I hope you find good things there, things that I could not find. George accompanied me to the bank to deposit the money from the house sale. This amount, larger than I thought, was the result of my perseverance and saving over the years. And what will you do now, Olivia? Where will you live? He asked with a tone of concern. I have a friend in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who has always offered me a room. I will stay with her for a while until I decide what to do with the money. Maybe I will buy a small apartment for myself, I replied, my voice somewhat dreamy, as if talking about a distant, bright future. In reality, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. A portion of the money would be donated to an organization that shelters women victims of domestic violence. I wanted to help other women who were suffering what I had suffered. I did not want them to live in fear, with the humiliation I had endured. The rest would buy a small farm on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, where I could find the peace I deserved after decades of caring for others. A quiet, serene place where I could live my own life without anyone bothering me. I had dreamed of a place like that for a long time, a place where I could grow vegetables, tend a garden, and live close to nature. As we walked, George suddenly stopped. Olivia, are you not going to take your personal belongings, clothes, documents, photos? He asked with a look of surprise. I shook my head. I already took the essentials last night. The rest are just objects. I can buy others. The truth was, I did not want anything that reminded me of that life, not even the photos of Robert as a child. The smiling child in the photos had died long ago, replaced by the man who had raised his hand against his own mother. I wanted to erase all traces of that painful past. I wanted to start a completely new life. By noon, the moving trucks had arrived, loading the masons' furniture into the house. George had explained the situation to them, asking for discretion. They agreed to complete the move before 6 hours 0 minutes in the evening, the time Robert usually returned from work. I did not go there to see it. I did not want to see that house anymore. I did not want to witness the scene I had meticulously orchestrated with my own eyes. Instead, I took a taxi to the Port Authority bus terminal and bought a ticket to Santa Fe. While waiting for the bus, I sent a message to my friend, Helen, letting her know I was on my way. What is going on, Olivia? She replied almost immediately. I will tell you when I get there, I responded. But yes, a lot has happened. Sitting in the waiting room, I imagined Robert returning home, putting his key in the lock only to discover that it no longer worked. I imagined his face finding strangers in the living room, the panic in his eyes realizing that he no longer had a place to call his own. A feeling of satisfaction grew inside me, but it was not malice, just a cold justice. Should I feel guilty? Perhaps, but every time that guilt threatened to surface, I touched my still aching face and remembered Carol's laughter. No, there was no room for guilt, only for the cold justice I had executed. I had done the right thing. The bus arrived, and I boarded with a small suitcase containing a few items of clothing and the annulled house deeds. When the engine started and we began to leave the city, I felt as if an enormous burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I looked out the window, the landscape gradually changing from the tall city buildings to the green fields and gentle hills of the countryside. My phone began to ring incessantly 2 hours later. Robert, Carol, Robert again. I could imagine the confusion they were going through. They were calling me, looking for me, but I would not answer. I turned off the phone and looked out the window, watching the scenery change from urban to rural. My new life was beginning. The bus slowly entered the Santa Fe terminal. The golden light of the afternoon spread over the adobe rooftops, creating a surprisingly tranquil landscape. Helen, my dear friend of decades, was already waiting for me. As soon as she saw me, she ran to embrace me, a strong, warm hug, as if wanting to alleviate all the pain I had endured. But then, when she saw my swollen face, her eyes filled with astonishment and concern. "My God, Olivia, who did this to you?" she gasped in a voice full of sorrow. "My son," I replied simply, finally allowing myself to cry in my friend's arms. The tears flowed uncontrollably, carrying with them all the grief and suffering I had suppressed for so long. "But now it is over," I added, my voice weak, but with a strange determination. She took me to her house on the outskirts of the small city, a cozy place with views of the mountains that embraced the horizon. The house, small and lovely, was decorated with pots of vibrant flowers, with a rustic and simple beauty. We sat on the porch with hot cups of tea, the gentle aroma of the tea floating in the air. I told Helen everything that had happened, from the fateful slap to the decision to sell the house. I told it slowly, detail by detail, omitting nothing. Helen listened attentively, sometimes sighing, sometimes squeezing my hand to show her empathy. "You sold the house while they were at work?" Helen asked incredulously, her eyes still a little amazed. I nodded. "The house was mine. It always was. Robert just thought it was his." Helen shook her head, impressed by my determination. "And now what? What are you going to do?" she asked with curiosity in her eyes. I looked at the distant mountains, feeling a peace I had not experienced in many years. It was a deep peace that spread from my heart, like a spring of fresh water that soothed all wounds. "I am going to start over, Helen. At 60 years old, I am going to start over." My voice was full of confidence and resolve. That night, I turned on the phone for a moment to check the time and found dozens of messages and missed calls. Most were from Robert, interspersed between desperate pleas and furious threats. "Call me back," he demanded. "Heartless mother, cruel woman." He said that I had ruined his life. Some were from Carol, accusing me of having shattered their lives, saying that I was evil. There were also messages from unknown numbers, probably the lawyers they had hired in a hurry. I skimmed them, not letting any word affect me. One message in particular caught my attention. It was from George. "Everything is done, Olivia. The masons have moved in and changed the locks. Robert showed up and yelled, but they called the police. Everything is protected by the law. Rest easy. It was not a rest easy of death, but of life. A new life I would build from the ashes of the previous one. I turned the phone off again and looked at the stars twinkling in the Santa Fe sky. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe deeply, filling my lungs with fresh air. The mountain air filled my lungs like a promise of freedom. The first few days at Helen's house were strange. I would wake up in the middle of the night, confused about where I was. My heart would pound wildly remembering the events. Sometimes I would instinctively touch my face, as if I could still feel Robert's slap. The swelling had gone down, but the memory remained as vivid as an open wound, haunting me. Helen noticed my restlessness. She was always so perceptive. One morning, while we were having coffee on the porch, she took my hand. "You did what you had to do, Olivia. Do not burden yourself with guilt for it." "It is not guilt," I replied, watching a hummingbird visit the garden flowers. I did not feel guilt, just an emptiness, a sense of loss. It is strangeness. For 38 years, I was Robert's mother. I built my life around that. And now? You are just Olivia, Helen finished with a kind smile. Olivia, who can do whatever she wants without having to answer to anyone. There was a terrifying freedom in those words. Who was Olivia without the role of a devoted mother? Who was I, apart from the woman who had dedicated her life to an ungrateful son? I needed to find myself again, to find the identity of Olivia that I had lost long ago. The second week passed quickly. Each day in Santa Fe brought me a sense of peace and recovery. Helen was always by my side, listening to my confidences, encouraging me to overcome my wounds. Thanks to her, I gradually regained my self-confidence, finding the pieces of the Olivia I had lost again. I started walking around the town, admiring the old streets, the colorful houses, the unique artisan shops. I felt like a child, discovering the world for the first time. On a beautiful sunny morning, I decided to turn on the phone to check my bank account. The money from the house sale was there, intact in the account. A considerable sum that would allow me to live comfortably in the coming years. There were more messages from Robert, but the tone had changed. Now he was pleading, saying it had been a mistake, that he regretted it, that Carol had left him. The last messages were almost incoherent, mixing anger and desperation. One of them made me stop. "I am sleeping in the car, Mum. I have nowhere to go. Please, forgive me." I felt a pang in my chest, that maternal instinct that never completely disappears. For a moment, my fingers slid across the keyboard, about to reply. But then I remembered Carol's laughter, the sound of his hand hitting my face, the humiliation I felt sitting at that table while they rejoiced in my pain. No, I would not weaken. I had come too far to turn back. I turned off the phone without answering. The next day, we visited a local real estate office. I had researched a small farm for sale on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, not too far from Santa Fe. It was not very big, just 1/2 acre of land with a modest house, some fruit trees, and a stream that ran at the end of the property. It was perfect, exactly as I had imagined it. "Are you sure?" Helen asked when I expressed my immediate interest. Do you not want to think about it a little more? I have been thinking about this for years without knowing it, I replied with a certainty that surprised me. I always wanted a place like this, just for me, where I could grow my vegetables and wake up to the sound of birds singing. We made an offer that same day. The owner, an old man who was moving to live with his daughter in Raleigh, accepted immediately. In 1 week, I would be the owner of my own piece of land on the outskirts of Asheville. A small piece of land, but it was mine, completely mine. While waiting for the paperwork to be finalized, I began buying the basics for my new life. Simple clothes, some kitchen utensils, seeds to plant. Helen accompanied me shopping. Her enthusiasm was almost as great as mine. You are different, she commented as we chose gardening tools. More alive. It was true. The hunched, silent woman who had lived in Robert's house, always trying to take up the least space possible, was disappearing. In her place, a person I had forgotten existed was emerging. Olivia, the one who planned, the one who smiled without fear, the one who chose for herself. I felt as if I was being reborn, living again. I spent time every day planning my garden. I wanted to grow all kinds of vegetables, from tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce to aromatic herbs. I also dreamed of having a small flower garden with all kinds of vibrant flowers. I wanted my house to be filled with the scent of flowers and the light of the sun. I imagined myself sitting on the porch, sipping a cup of hot coffee, gazing at my lush garden, listening to the birds singing. A simple, quiet life, but full of meaning. I also started reading more books. I bought the novels I always wanted to read but never had time for. Books about gardening, about cooking, about history. I wanted to expand my knowledge. I wanted to learn new things. I felt as if I was reliving my youth, experiencing the things I had missed. Each page of a book opened a new world, helping me forget the pains of the past. My determination and resolve grew more and more. I was no longer afraid. I no longer doubted. I knew I was on the right path. I had rediscovered myself. I had found my purpose in life. I was ready to start a new life, a life of which I was the owner. 2 days before moving to my small farm, one quiet morning was suddenly interrupted by the sound of an unknown car pulling up in front of Helen's house. My heart instantly froze. A chill ran down my spine when I saw Robert get out of the car. He looked different, his hair disheveled, unshaven, and deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he had not slept in many nights. He seemed to have aged several years in a few weeks. I hid behind the curtain. The familiar feeling of fear returned. How did he find us? Helen whispered, also hidden by the window with a worried look. He probably called all your friends until he tracked us down, I replied, squeezing her arm to show my empathy. Do you want me to send him away? I took a deep breath, feeling the initial fear give way to a cold calm. No, I will not run away any more. No, I will talk to him. Helen looked at me, surprised. Are you sure? After what he did, I responded. I need to close this chapter once and for all. I walked out onto the porch, feeling my feet firmer than ever. Robert approached slowly like a wounded animal, his eyes full of weariness and despair. Upon seeing me, he stopped, unsure, as if he could not believe what he saw with his own eyes. His eyes scanned my face, where the last bruises still remained as vestiges of the storm. Mom, he began with a choked voice. A call that I once loved more than anything in the world. But now it was just a strange sound. I raised my hand to interrupt him. Do not call me that. You lost that right that night. He swallowed, his eyes teary. Please, let me explain. I was drunk. I had problems at work. Carol pressured me. He tried to find all the reasons to justify his actions, but I would not accept it. 20 times, I said simply, my voice cold and determined. You hit me 20 times while your wife laughed. There is no explanation for that, Robert. He knelt on the cobblestone path. Now he was sobbing. Tears ran down his dirty face. I have lost everything, Mum. Carol left me. I am sleeping in the car. My friends are not answering my calls. No one wants to help me. I looked at him there, broken. The son I had raised, the one I had held in my arms when he had a fever, the one I had sewn a superhero costume for, the one I had taught to ride a bicycle. Now he was just a broken man, begging not for forgiveness, but for convenience. He was not sorry for what he had done, but only for what he had lost. What do you want, Robert? I asked. My voice was now softer, but no less firm. I want to come back, he sobbed. I want my life back. Please, tell the new owners it was a mistake, that you could not sell the house. And that was the truth. It was not genuine remorse. It was just desperation to recover lost comfort. Not once did he mention my pain, my humiliation. Everything revolved around what he had lost. He was still so selfish, only thinking about himself. I cannot do that, I replied calmly. Even if I could, I would not. The house is gone, Robert. Your old life is gone. He lifted his face, disfigured by crying. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? You are 38 years old. You have a job and you are healthy. You will do what many people do. Start over, rent a small apartment, save, rebuild. Alone? He asked, his voice almost childish, full of fear. Yes, alone, just like I am doing at 60 years old. Robert slowly stood up, wiping his face with his sleeve. Something changed in his expression. The pleading gave way to a contained anger. You have no heart. A real mother would never do this to her own son. That might have hurt me a few weeks ago, but now it only confirmed that I had made the right decision. A real son would never do what you did. Goodbye, Robert. I turned to go back inside the house, but his words stopped me. This is not over. I will sue you. I will prove that you were mentally ill when you signed those papers. I will take back what is mine. I looked at him over my shoulder, only feeling a deep sadness. The house was never yours, Robert. That was your mistake from the beginning. I went inside the house and closed the door, listening to his screams, which turned into increasingly desperate threats. Helen hugged me in silence as we listened to the car start with a loud roar, the tires screeching on the asphalt. Are you okay? She asked a while later, her voice full of concern. Surprisingly, I was fine. The encounter I had dreaded had happened, and instead of tearing me down, it had affirmed my strength. Robert was not sorry for what he had done. He was just desperate for what he had lost. I am much better than I thought, I replied honestly. A sense of relief spread throughout my body. This confrontation, although painful, had freed me. That night I received a call from George. Olivia, Robert found me. He is threatening to sue you. It will be useless, right? I asked, feeling a small tremor of anxiety. Absolutely useless, George assured me. The house was legally in your name. You were completely sane when you sold it. And we have witnesses to the assault if necessary. He is just bluffing out of desperation. And Carol? I asked. She went back to her parents in Knoxville as far as I know. It seems the marriage was already on the verge of breaking up before this incident. The loss of the house was just the final push. I received that information in silence. Robert was moving on with his life, rebuilding it as I had told him he would. For some reason, this brought me peace, Olivia. Not because I was worried about his happiness, but because it meant he had less reason to try to find me, to disturb my new life. Thank you, George. That was what I needed to know. Olivia, he said before I hung up, are you happy there? The question surprised me. Happy? It was a word I had not used in so long that I had almost forgotten its meaning. I am at peace, I finally replied, and I think for me, that is happiness. That same day, after the guests had left, I sat down at the kitchen table and started writing. Not a simple diary, but the beginning of a book. My story, told not with anger or bitterness, but as a testament that it is never too late to start over, to demand respect, to find peace. I wrote every night for weeks, the words flowing like the stream that ran through my property, sometimes calm, sometimes tumultuous, but always moving forward. I wrote about the slaps, about the humiliation, about the sale of the house, about my rebirth on the farm. I wrote without reservations, putting on paper the pains I had never shared with anyone. I felt as if I was removing a weight that had oppressed me for so many years. When I finished the draft, I sent it to Helen, who gave it to a friend who worked at a small publishing house. Surprisingly, they were interested in publishing it. Your story can help other women find their own strength, the editor said over the phone, especially older women who believe they are trapped in abusive situations. The book launch for Starting Over at 60 took place in a small bookstore in the city 6 months later. I was very nervous, unsure if I had done the right thing by exposing my life that way. What if Robert reads it? What if he tries to stop me? The questions lingered in my head, but when I saw the room full of women, some young, some middle-aged, many older like me, their eyes full of empathy and hope, I realized that my story no longer belonged only to me. It was a beacon for others who were still lost in the darkness I had also known. How did you find the courage? A woman asked during the book signing. Her trembling hand squeezed my book. I reflected for a moment before answering. It was not courage I found first. It was dignity. The courage came after, when I realized I deserved more than I was receiving. She nodded with teary eyes and whispered a thank you that carried the weight of decades of silence. I knew I had done the right thing. The move to the farm took place on a sunny Thursday morning. The place was even more beautiful than I remembered in my imagination. The house, small but cozy, nestled among rows of green trees. The property sloped gently down to the stream that murmured at the end of the land. The fruit trees were full of blossoms, promising an abundant harvest in the coming months. The scent of damp earth and wild flowers mixed, creating a gentle, fresh, and pure aroma. I took a deep breath, feeling the peace infiltrate every cell. Helen insisted on staying with me for the first few days, helping me organize some furniture I had bought and plant the first seeds in the vegetable garden we had created. Together we dug the earth, planted the seeds, watered, and chatted about the past and future plans. Those simple moments brought me a joy I had lost long ago. At night, we sat on the porch in the newly bought rocking chairs, sipping chamomile tea and watching the fireflies dance among the trees, creating a magical scene. It is strange, I commented on the third night as we watched the stars. I have spent so much of my life caring for others that now I almost feel guilty about only taking care of myself. Helen smiled, her eyes full of understanding. You deserve it, Olivia. You always have. Her words were like a balm, soothing my inner anxieties. The day Helen returned home, I felt a knot in my chest. Was I really ready to live alone, away from everything and everyone? The farm was 20 minutes by car from the nearest town, and I did not have my own car yet. I will be close, Helen assured me as she said goodbye, and I will visit whenever I can. Besides, you will meet the neighbors soon. They are good people around here, in the Asheville countryside. When her car disappeared down the dirt road, I sat on the porch and observed my small kingdom. The loneliness I feared did not arrive. Instead, I felt a deep peace, as if I had finally found my place in the world. This is where I belong. In the following weeks, I established a simple routine, waking up with the sunrise, brewing a strong cup of coffee, and tending the garden before the heat of the day became intense. The first seedlings had already begun to sprout. Lettuce, carrots, tomatoes, aromatic herbs. Seeing these small lives grow under my care brought me a satisfaction I had never experienced before. I felt like a real farmer, enjoying every moment of connection with nature. Then I would spend a few hours exploring the property, discovering its secrets. I found an old apple tree hidden among other trees, a small stone bench near the stream that the previous owner must have built, and even a hummingbird nest in a flower bush near the kitchen window. In the evening, I read the books I always wanted to read but never had time for. Novels, biographies, books about gardening and cooking, or I simply sat on the porch with my notebook, writing my thoughts, memories, plans for the future. It was like rediscovering a version of myself that had been silenced for decades. Olivia was not Robert's mother. She was not my late husband's wife. But Olivia, an independent woman, free, living her own life. The closest neighbors, the Johnson family, came to introduce themselves after a week, a retired couple who grew heirloom tomatoes on a larger farm, about 1 mile away. They brought homemade bread and peach jam as a welcome gift. If you need anything, do not hesitate to call, Mr. Johnson said with a kind smile. Here in the country, we look out for each other. His wife invited me to a Sunday dinner, where I met other neighbors in the area, simple, sincere people who welcomed me without asking about my past. It was refreshing to be simply Mrs. Olivia of the new farm, instead of Robert's mother, or the woman assaulted by her son. I felt accepted, loved, and being myself. One afternoon, while I was picking some aromatic herbs for dinner, I heard the sound of a car approaching down the dirt road. My heart instantly raced. A chill of fear ran down my spine. Could it be Robert? Had he found my address? I dropped the basket of herbs and ran to the house, anxiously peering out the window. It was just the mail carrier, delivering a package that Helen had sent, flower seeds we had not found in this area. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I realized that the fear was still there, latent beneath the surface of my new life, like an indelible shadow. At night, sitting on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, I reflected on that fear. I had rebuilt my life, found peace, and even a new community that had welcomed me, but I still feared the sound of unknown cars. Robert still had that power over me, and I decided I would not allow it. I did not want to live with fear anymore. The next morning I called George. I need to know how he is, I told him bluntly without mincing words, not out of maternal concern, but for the peace of my spirit. George was silent for a moment, as if weighing his words. He's done. Robert dropped the lawsuit, Olivia. He consulted several lawyers, and they all said the same thing. It is useless. As far as I know, he rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Raleigh and is trying to rebuild his life. And Carol? I asked. She went back to her parents in Knoxville, as far as I know. It seems the marriage was already on the verge of breaking up before this incident. The loss of the house was just the final push. I received that information in silence. Robert was moving on with his life, rebuilding it as I had told him he would. For some reason, this brought me peace, Olivia. Not because I was worried about his happiness, but because it meant he had less reason to try to find me, to disturb my new life. Thank you, George. That was what I needed to know. Olivia, he said before I hung up, are you happy there? The question surprised me. Happy? It was a word I had not used in so long that I had almost forgotten its meaning. I am at peace, I finally replied. And I think for me, that is happiness. That same day, after the guests had left, I sat down at the kitchen table and started writing. Not a simple diary, but the beginning of a book. My story, told not with anger or bitterness, but as a testament that it is never too late to start over, to demand respect, to find peace. I wrote every night for weeks, the words flowing like the stream that ran through my property, sometimes calm, sometimes tumultuous, but always moving forward. I wrote about the slaps, about the humiliation, about the sale of the house, about my rebirth on the farm. I wrote without reservations, putting on paper the pains I had never shared with anyone. I felt as if I was removing a weight that had oppressed me for so many years. When I finished the draft, I sent it to Helen, who gave it to a friend who worked at a small publishing house. Surprisingly, they were interested in publishing it. Your story can help other women find their own strength, the editor said over the phone, especially older women who believe they are trapped in abusive situations. The book launch for Starting Over at 60 took place in a small bookstore in the city 6 months later. I was very nervous, unsure if I had done the right thing by exposing my life that way. What if Robert reads it? What if he tries to stop me? The questions lingered in my head, but when I saw the room full of women, some young, some middle-aged, many older like me, their eyes full of empathy and hope, I realized that my story no longer belonged only to me. It was a beacon for others who were still lost in the darkness I had also known. How did you find the courage? A woman asked during the book signing. Her trembling hand squeezed my book. I reflected for a moment before answering. It was not courage I found first. It was dignity. The courage came after, when I realized I deserved more than I was receiving. She nodded with teary eyes and whispered a thank you that carried the weight of decades of silence. I knew I had done the right thing. At the end of the event, when the bookstore was almost empty, the last guests had gone, I noticed a man standing near the door. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Robert, thinner, older. He was looking at me from a distance with an expression I could not decipher. Our eyes met across the nearly empty bookstore. Robert did not approach. He just stood there, motionless near the door, like a shadow. I felt my body tense, instinctively preparing for a confrontation. Another battle. Helen, who was nearby arranging the unsold books, noticed my tension. "That is him," she whispered, following my gaze. I nodded slightly, unable to take my eyes off the man I once called son. He looked different, not just thinner, but somehow smaller, as if he had shrunk inside his own clothes. The arrogance that always accompanied him had disappeared, replaced by weariness and a hint of something that could be called humility. "Do you want me to send him away?" Helen offered, her voice protective. "No," I replied, surprised by my own calm. "It is okay." I got up and walked slowly towards him, feeling strangely strong in my new dress. A gift I had bought myself with the first advance from the book. Robert remained motionless, his eyes registering my every step as if he were seeing a ghost. I stopped a few feet from him, maintaining a safe distance. Not out of fear, I realized, but out of choice, out of respect for my own boundaries. "Hello, Robert," I said simply, my voice not trembling. He swallowed, his eyes scanning my face, my posture as if trying to reconcile the confident woman in front of him with the submissive mother he had known. "Mom, you look different," he finally commented. His voice was soft and uncertain, like that of a child noticing a change in an adult for the first time. "Yes," I confirmed. There was no need for further explanation. He was holding a copy of my book. I noticed it. The edges were a little curled, as if he had read it several times. "I came to give you this," he said, holding out a white envelope. "It is not much, but it is all I can afford for now." I looked at the envelope without taking it. "What is this?" "Money," he replied, still holding out the envelope. "I started saving after reading your book, a little each month to compensate for the house." The surprise left me momentarily speechless. Of all the things I imagined Robert might want, this had never occurred to me. "I do not need your money," I finally replied. "I know," he said, lowering the hand with the envelope, "but I need to give something back to you. Please." There was something in his voice, not manipulation or self-pity, but a genuine need. I realized it was not about the money. It was about recognition, about taking responsibility. "What do you really want, Robert?" I asked bluntly, my eyes fixed on his. He looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked back at me, his eyes surprisingly clear, without the darkness from before. "I want to say that I read your book 3 times. I want to say that you were right to do what you did. I want to say that I am sorry, not for losing the house, but for what I did to you, for the slaps, for the humiliation." He paused, taking a deep breath. and I want to say that I understand if you never forgive me. I was not prepared for this. I had imagined Robert angry, threatening, even seeking revenge, or pitiful, asking for financial help. But not this calm, thoughtful version, who seemed to have truly understood the weight of his actions. Where do you live now? I asked, changing the subject as I processed his words. I rented a small apartment near work, he replied. Nothing special, but it is what I can afford here in Raleigh. And Carol? A sad smile appeared on his face. She left when she realized there was no longer a big house or a comfortable bank account. In fact, it was the best thing that could have happened. We were silent for a moment. Helen kept her distance, but I could feel her attentive gaze, ready to intervene if necessary. Your book, Robert continued, gently lifting the copy. It is very powerful. It hurt me a lot to read it. A lot. But I needed it. I never saw things from your perspective before. Most abusers do not, I replied, surprised by the analytical coldness of my voice. It was not cruelty, just an observation. I know I do not deserve anything from you, he said. His voice trembled. I just want you to know that I am trying to be a better person. I am in a group for men with a history of violence. I am learning. I looked at him, really looked at him. Beyond the familiar image of my son, beyond the good and bad memories, I just saw a middle-aged man trying to rebuild himself from the wreckage of his own mistakes. Not so different from what I had done. I am glad you are seeking help, I said honestly. That is the first step. He nodded, still holding the envelope. I still want you to accept this, not for you, but for me. I need to start repairing what I did somehow. I thought for a moment and had an idea. There is a center for women victims of violence in the city. It is called the New Dawn House. His eyes widened a little in understanding. That is where you donated part of the money from the house sale, right? It is in the book. I nodded. They need more than I do. He put the envelope in his pocket, accepting my suggestion. I will do it tomorrow morning. Another silence, less tense this time. Your farm? He commented, referring to the descriptions in the book. It sounds like a beautiful place. It sounds like you are happy there. I am happy, I confirmed. I found my place. I want to, he began. No, forget it. What? Nothing. I have no right to ask you for anything. I understood what he meant even without him finishing the sentence. He wanted to visit me, to see where I lived, perhaps try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But he was right. It was too soon. Maybe it always would be. I have to go, he finally said, noticing my silence. I just wanted to see you and tell you this in person. Your book will help many people. You are stronger than I ever imagined. It was the most sincere thing Robert had said to me in his entire adult life. Not manipulation or flattery in exchange for something. Just a simple truth, expressed without expectations. Thank you for coming, I replied, surprising us both. And good luck in Charleston, South Carolina. He nodded, an almost imperceptible movement, and then turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and looked back one last time. Mom! Olivia! I am truly sorry. And then he was gone, leaving only the soft jingle of the bookstore bell behind him. Helen immediately approached. "Are you okay? What did he want?" I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of emotions I could not name. It was not forgiveness, it was too soon for that. It was not reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. It was something more subtle, more complex. "He wanted to acknowledge what he did," I finally replied. "And I think he also needed to see that I am okay." "And are you okay?" Helen asked, looking for signs of distress on my face. I thought about my current life, the quiet farm with the murmuring stream, the chickens scratching happily in the yard, the caramel-coloured dog named Popcorn, who greeted me every morning with boundless enthusiasm, the meals shared with the neighbours, the quiet nights writing under the table lamp. "I am better than ever," I replied honestly. A sense of peace had completely taken hold of me. My small farm was thriving more every day. The vegetable garden not only provided me with enough food, but also allowed me to trade vegetables for fresh eggs, homemade bread, and milk with the neighbours. The fruit trees began to bear their fruit, and I learned to make jams and preserves with Mrs. Johnson. I bought some chickens for fresh eggs, and adopted a caramel-coloured mixed-breed dog named Popcorn, who became my faithful companion. One morning, Helen visited me along with Martha, the director of the women's shelter in Asheville. Martha came to thank me for the anonymous donation, the money that had helped repair the roof and buy new beds for the children. I was touched. I only wished it would help other women find their strength. Martha and Helen praised my bravery, something I did not believe I possessed. But seeing the gratitude in Martha's eyes, I realized that my story could have meaning for others. 2 years later, I decided to host a Sunday dinner to celebrate, inviting Helen, the Johnson family, Martha, and a few women from the support group, including Eleanor. The morning was clear and sunny, with a gentle breeze. I got up early to prepare the house and the food. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh green bean casserole, and cornbread. Popcorn slept lazily near the kitchen, occasionally opening an eye to check on things. The house was clean, cozy, and filled with the watercolor paintings that I painted. The guests began to arrive around noon. Helen brought a lemon cake. The Johnson family brought a special cider. Martha arrived with 2 women from the centre. Eleanor appeared with a childhood friend. We set up a large table on the porch, spreading a colourful embroidered tablecloth. Laughter and stories resonated. I observed my diverse guests, now an indispensable part of my life. After dinner, while we were having coffee, a car approached unexpectedly. I was not expecting anyone else. Everyone looked at me curiously. "Are you expecting someone else, Olivia?" Helen asked. "No," I replied, getting up. My heart raced as I realized it was Robert, alone. A tense silence fell over the table. Helen approached, whispering, "Do you want me to send him away?" I looked at my friends. They all knew my story. Eleanor was especially tense. "No," I finally replied. "I will talk to him." I walked toward the car with firm steps. Robert got out, looking hesitant, carrying a small package. "Sorry for showing up unannounced," he said. "I called many times, but no one answered." "We were having lunch," I explained, pointing to the table. "It is the celebration of my second anniversary here." He looked at the guests who were observing us. "I did not know you had visitors." I can come back another day. I hesitated, but a part of me wanted to close this chapter. What do you want, Robert? I asked bluntly. He held out the small package. I brought you this. Next week is your 62nd birthday. I did not want it to go unnoticed. I was surprised he remembered the date. Thank you. An awkward silence enveloped us. Robert looked at the ground, then at the house, at the property, avoiding my gaze. Your farm is beautiful, he finally commented, just as you described it in the book. It is my home now, I replied. He nodded. It looks like you are happy. I am happy, I confirmed. Robert, I have guests, I said softly but firmly. Why do you not tell me what really brought you here? He took a deep breath, finally looking me in the eyes. I am moving south, to Charleston, South Carolina. I got a job there. I am leaving next week. The news took me by surprise. Oh, that is good for you. I think so, he replied. It is a new beginning, away from the memories, away from the people who knew the old me. I needed to see you before I left, to tell you in person that I still regret it, that your book changed my life as much as yours, that now I understand what I did, even though it took me too long. His words were sincere. I hope you find what you are looking for there, I replied honestly. Robert looked toward the porch. You built a beautiful life here, new people, a new purpose. He smiled sadly. I am glad for you, truly. At that moment, I felt something shift inside me. It was not forgiveness, but the letting go of a burden. Robert no longer had power over my happiness or my peace. Thank you for coming to say goodbye, I said, and good luck in Charleston, South Carolina. He nodded, understanding that it was the end that we both needed. There were no emotional hugs, no promises of reconciliation, just mutual acknowledgement and respect for our separate paths. Goodbye, Olivia, he said, using my name. Goodbye, Robert. He got into the car and drove away. I stood there, watching until the car disappeared. The small gift was still in my hand. When I returned to the porch, everyone was looking at me. Are you okay? Helen asked. Yes, I replied, returning to my seat. He came to say goodbye. He is moving south. And that is the end? Eleanor asked softly. I think it is a fitting end. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Simply sufficient. There were murmurs of understanding. What did he bring you? Helen asked, pointing to the package. I do not know, I replied, starting to carefully open it. Inside there was a carved wooden box, and in it my grandmother's gold wristwatch, then my mother's, and finally mine. I found it among the things that were left, a small note said. I know how much it means to you. I am sorry for everything. I gently touched the watch. It was part of my history. It is my grandmother's, I explained. How wonderful that it has returned to you, Mrs. Johnson commented softly. I put the watch on my wrist. The rest of the afternoon passed in a lighter atmosphere. Robert's unexpected visit had simply added a final note. I did not know what was needed. The laughter returned, and as the sun began to set, I felt complete. After the last guest left, I sat alone on the porch with popcorn. My grandmother's watch shone softly, marking the time. Thinking about the 2 years that had passed, I realized how far I had come. The woman who trembled under her son's slaps had transformed into someone I barely recognized. She was the person she always should have been. At 62 years old, I had rebuilt not only a life, but an identity. An identity not based on sacrifice or family obligations, but on conscious choices and healthy boundaries. I had discovered that it is never too late to say no to disrespect, no to violence, no to relationships that wear us down. And perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that it is never too late to say yes to yourself. The sun completely disappeared. I got up, called popcorn, and went into the house that I had truly made my own. Tomorrow would be another day in my new life, a life I had conquered, not just by surviving the slaps, but by finding the courage to respond to them not with more violence, but with a cold, precise determination that had changed everything. As I prepared for sleep, I thought about the words starting over, the title of my book, the theme of the support group, the essence of a better life. Starting over does not mean erasing the past or pretending the wounds never existed. It means building something new and better on the scars, using them as a foundation instead of allowing them to become a prison. Robert was starting over in Charleston, South Carolina. Eleanor was starting over on the coast of South Carolina. Other women were starting over at the shelter, in small city apartments, in new relationships. And I had started over here, among the apple and peach trees, with a caramel-colored dog and a murmuring stream, surrounded by people who saw me for who I am, not for what they could get from me. Time had taught me that revenge does not need to be noisy or violent to be effective. Sometimes the best response to cruelty is simply refusing to be diminished by it, to build a life so full and joyful that the people who tried to destroy us become irrelevant, not out of hatred, but out of maturity. This is my truth at 62 years old. That life can bloom most gloriously after a devastating storm. That the strongest roots often grow in earth that has been completely turned over. That it is never, ever too late to say, "This life is mine." And to any woman who is listening to my story, whether young or old, trapped in abusive relationships or just beginning to recognize the warning signs, my message is clear. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. You deserve a life that is truly yours. And if I, at 60 years old, could find the courage to start over after decades of submission, you can too. No matter your age, your financial situation, or your fears, the first step is the hardest. But every step after that will become a little easier.